Get in the know. Non-stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Purple Daily on draft every Monday on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. We are 2 weeks away from breaking down a week one, hopefully win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers right here on Purple Daily. This is Purple Daily on draft. Tyler Fornes, Miles Gorham. We're here to break things down from an NFL draft perspective as we do every Monday right here on Purple Daily, where we just want to see the Vikings win a Super Bowl before we die. Thank you for all the kind words to Miles, who has now entered the show. Miles, you've from what I've seen, not too much negative feedback. Forno and I like to get the negative feedback. So far, it's been positive feedback from Miles.
It'll come.
Yes, it'll come both ways. It's like a boomerang. Karma.
Tell them that you were a fry cook when you were 20 years old. It'll come back to haunt you.
And then you realize, wait, I was the fry cook at 20 years old. So
right.
Joke is on you, my friend. I get it. Well, boys, let's kind of get right down to the meat and potatoes here. We got a nice little show packed. We'll start with these preseason football takeaways. We'll take a look at next year's draft from a positional standpoint. And then we have Freaks List. We've been teasing out college football prospects for the last few weeks. We're finally going to get into that. So we got a loaded show here. So let's get into it. Let's start, though, from last Saturday against the Seattle Seahawks. Vikings have their second preseason football game of the year. Let's start here, I think, with Lewis Cine. That's been kind of the topic here. The first-round pick from the Vikings last year who suffered the gruesome leg injury. He gets another start. He plays a handful of snaps, some good. There was some bad. Forno, I want to start with you because you also did some breakdowns, I know, after his first game on VikingsWire.com. What did you like, and maybe what did you not like from Lewis Cine's game against the Seahawks on Saturday?
So we'll start with the Seahawks from last Thursday. One of his biggest issues was he was making the right reads, but he was tackling way too high. And when you're tackling up here in the chest area, that can easily be broken, especially by guys with any kind of strength. So when you tackle up high, like he got Jackson Smith and Jigba, but Jigba tried to deck and he was able to grab the jersey and kind of throw him down. That's a risky style tackle. You want to be able to have better form. You want to attack lower. You want to attack like between the knees and like below the your chest, so like the torso and the thighs, because those areas are gonna be a lot harder to wiggle out, and you have a lot more leverage in those instances. And Cine kind of overcorrected this past week. He started going too low. I'd rather guys go too low than go too high, because all it takes is literally if you just hit the shoe, you can trip a guy up, and then that's the end of the play. Unfortunately, he went too low, and Tyjae Spears elevated over the top of him and hurdled him and made him just look atrocious on that touchdown. But you can adjust with that. People are complaining, oh, he's a bust. He's playing into the third and fourth quarter. Good. Give him reps. Like, he played 2 defensive snaps last year. He's still trying to get back into the flow of normal football, considering he snapped his leg in half in England last year. Like, that's not a normal injury. One of my writers for Vikings Wire, Kevin Fielder, snapped his leg, like a very similar injury, got it in completely different circumstances, but he saw that Cine was doing sprints after 4 months, and he's like, what in the world is going on? Because it's such a devastating type injury to your body. Well, Cine is never going to be the guy that you're just going to want floating out over the top. He's got the speed for it, but he just doesn't have those instincts and that ability. Like, when you think of a deep safety, you think of an Earl Thomas. That's not his skill set. His skill set is going to be attacking downhill, and it's going to be a lot of what Harrison Smith is great at. And if Lewis Cine can kind of hone those instincts just a little better and figure that portion out, you're looking at a player who could just be a devastating weapon in the box for the next 5 to 10 years. But it's going to take some time, and it's going to have some warts. And we're seeing that right now. But it's better right now than week one. So I'm happy with the growth that we're seeing. We just need to keep seeing it.
I like that he actually is playing some snaps. To your point, Forno, I mean, it's one thing when people say you see the first round pick, or you just see most of the guys in general playing meaningful preseason snaps, that, hey, those players probably won't be making much of a significant impact on the actual 53-man roster. But from Lewis Cine's standpoint, yeah, I mean, he had a compound leg fracture. He barely played last year. He only really played special teams. So as many reps as he can get in the preseason are probably going to be a good thing for his development, regardless if they figure out he's a hit or if he's indeed a bust. Miles, what did you like or maybe not like from Lewis Cine in the latest preseason game?
Yeah, I think you both brought up great points. I agree with just about everything. I think the tackling aspect of it is something he still hasn't. He's instinctually explosive in his tackles. So I think to your point, Forno, is it's all about just the technique. And I think you could fix technique. And I think I love the part about the Harrison Smith comparison in terms of how he should be used. And if I was Lewis Cine, I'd just be in his back pocket, like constantly, just like a shadow, just because I think this could be Harrison Smith's last year in purple. 100%, not 100% sure about that, but I think if Lewis Cine wanted to learn from someone like him and kind of master that craft a little bit more, that'd be the perfect guy to learn from in that role within this defense, especially. And so I think getting that whole game to play and just kind of get more of the feel for the game was super important for, I think, Lewis Cine. And I don't really care. I treat him more like a rookie this year than you'd want a second-year player to be. But that's just kind of where he is because of the compound fracture last year. And he kind of just didn't seem like he was up to speed as much as you would like to come out of training camp last year as well. And so that stuff happens. Some guys aren't quite as ready as they need, as you expect them to be. And so I think with Cine, just kind of using this as like a rookie year to get as many reps as he can during the offseason. And so that if he does get in the games during the regular season, you have a little bit more confidence in that he's got a little bit more of a true flow of the game rather than just coming in kind of cold as if he was only playing part of the games.
So basically, will he have to most likely wait for an injury to probably make significant playing time, like in the regular season at this point? He clearly looks like he's going to be like third or fourth on the depth chart, depending on how you really want to view Josh Metellus too, because Harrison Smith, Cam Bynum look to be your starting safeties with Metellus mixing in there in a bunch of different packages. But is an injury probably going to be the best chance for him to get like legitimate playing time, which can happen in the NFL? Mm-hmm. But it seems like he's still a long ways away from getting there.
No, I think he's going to get regular playing time right away, but I think we need to curb our expectations for what regular playing time is going to be. I think seeing like a 30% snapshot right off the bat, like I don't necessarily think being a starter in the secondary in this defense is going to mean much. It's going to mean that you're going to get probably like the early down stuff, but there's going to be so many sub packages with this team and how they kind of go about things. I'm not going to be worried at all if the Cine isn't a starter X, Y, or Z, because he's going to get playing time and that's going to end up helping him in this defense. It's like when you look at all those Patriots defenses, guys subbed in all the time and he's of that same tree. He's probably going to end up doing the same thing.
Miles, I'm not sure if I agree with that though, but we can talk about it.
Well, I mean, also it's on training camp. They're rotating guys constantly in and out, and they're using different packages with the ones, different packages with the twos.
Yeah,
they're doing a lot of different things with their personnel grouping. So that leads me to believe that is going to end up being true.
So, Miles, where would you play him differently, or how do you see him getting on the field more than what Forno said?
I mean, I think the only real position that he could really get on the field more of is with like that Josh Metellus like star role in that like sub package role, just because unless they do play a lot of dime, which is possible to Forno's point, if he's that fourth or fifth or fourth safety in the dime packages, then that changes things a little bit. But I guess I just don't know if that's the case. I guess we'll see as time goes on, but you would hope that he could earn that opportunity. But I think that Metellus role, even though I'm not sure I think Cine is ready for that role, I think it's the one that has more interchangeable off on the field type of ability. Whereas Harrison Smith's not coming off the field, and I don't expect Cam Bynum, who's probably their best true, like outside of Harrison Smith, he's probably their best true like free safety at the up top compared to like Cine or even Metellus. So I have a hard time seeing Bynum losing snaps to Cine early in the season. Now, if guys start to struggle, if Cine maybe continues to progress as the offseason and into the early part of the season goes on, that might be an opportunity for him to get some more snaps. But I just don't know if he's quite ready to see like consistent snaps. Now, I think it'd be good to get him involved in the game and the flow of the game, but I'm just not sure I expect it to happen right away. Early in the season, I should say.
I like it. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how he's used, whether that's in early down packages, whether it's big dime or however it is. I know Judd Zolgad has been looking at a bunch of different those formations too, so be on the lookout for more camp notes from Judd as the Vikings continue on their training camp exercise here. Let's go to the offensive side. Let's go to the rookie quarterback, Jaren Hall. So Hall gets, again, the second half, not a ton of snaps. I know Forno has been a big Jaren Hall fan. He was a big fan of the pick when they made it back in May here. But Forno, what did you take away from Jaren Hall's second appearance, basically, in game action for the Vikings?
Fun fact, I just posted an All-22 article 15 minutes ago breaking down all 12 of his dropbacks, and you have to contextualize everything. And I'll start here. look, I am the biggest fan of Jaren Hall. I don't think there's anybody who's a bigger fan of Jaren Hall than me, but I still remember he's a 5th round pick. If it doesn't work, it shouldn't be a surprise. And it should be a little bit of a surprise if it does, but he has all the tools to be able to get there. Now, when you look at what he's doing for the Vikings in these preseason games, one of the biggest things is he's running a super vanilla offense. They're not really game planning, and they're running basic core concepts everybody in the world knows that you do. Hell, the Tennessee Titans spammed outside zone, 30 times? Yes, on Saturday night. Like, that's a basic concept. You're not reinventing the wheel. Everybody knows you're going to run it. So when you look at those elements, and the fact he's playing with mostly 3rd teamers and sometimes 2nd teamers, you have to contextualize the performances. What is he doing based on the confines of each individual play? It's not looking at the stat sheet. Yeah, he was 4 of 7 for 50 yards, but he had 12 dropbacks. He didn't make any bad decisions. The only one that was poor was he took a sack when he was in the pocket for 5 seconds. That internal clock's got to go off. What I did see was right after that, the next drive where they had that touchdown drive, after 3 seconds, back-to-back plays, he's bailing the pocket and then running the ball because there's nothing out there. So that shows to me development and growth. He's making throws in the bucket where he had his first drop back was a bootleg, and he ends up layering a ball beautifully to Thayer Thomas on a sail route. The safety just has some insane closing speed, makes the play, breaks it up. But you want him to be able to drive the ball a little better, but he can't because there's a defensive lineman charging at him. So instead of trying to take it upfield, he's staying put and he just drops it in the perfect spot. Not a catch, but 2 of his incompletions were drops. That's not going to help you on the stat sheet. It's not going to help people's perception of you, even though it's not your fault. So I gave his performance a B, all things considered, and I was really impressed on some of the little things week to week and even growth during the game, because that 5-second sack, you saw an immediate fix, like within the same quarter. That's stuff you want to see from a young player.
Yeah, I would like to see him get a start for sure. Maybe they wrap up this preseason game. I know they brought in Jordan Ta'amu from the XFL. So, are they bringing him in potentially too? Because Nick Mullins is throwing a bunch of passes, and we all kind of know that Nick Mullins is the backup to Kirk. So those 1 and 2 spots are solidified. So are they bringing in Ta'amu to potentially, make life easier for Jaren Hall, or to get both those guys a little bit more reps? That part's going to be really interesting too. Miles, you obviously watched a lot of the preseason game on Saturday too, and we haven't really gotten your thoughts on Jaren Hall with you only being the 2nd episode here on Purple Daily on Draft. So what were your thoughts when they made the pick? And I guess what have you seen from him in limited action with the Vikings so far?
Yeah, so I was down at the Senior Bowl with Tyler actually too, and we talked with Jaren Hall. I wasn't as impressed with him in the Senior Bowl, but I think when you go back to the film and kind of dive further into that, you could see exactly why and all the traits that people fell in love with, like someone like Taforno specifically. Like, the guy's really good at maneuvering the pocket, and I think his escapability and ability to throw on the run is really good. And so I was really impressed with some of those things from him coming out, and I felt that he had a really good command of and control of himself. Not every quarterback kind of plays under control, and I think Jaren did a good job of that coming out of BYU. Now he's a little bit of an older prospect, so I think you would hope that some of those things would naturally just progress with him. But at the same time, he was a 5th round pick. So I was excited that the Vikings took a shot at a guy that had has a little bit of upside, but also has some of the ability coming out of college that you look for in like a potential backup quarterback, and kind of like that Sam Howell vibe to me in that I think there's that long-term backup, maybe long-term bridge starter. And anything more than that is literally the biggest win you could ask for. And so I was excited about that. And I thought, I was excited about the Kellen Mond pick a few years back, but I think Jaren Hall fits a little bit more of what I truly thought Kellen Mond could be. And so I guess I was probably a little bit more excited about that. And then I wanted Dorian Thompson-Robinson, if I'm going to be honest. DTR was my guy coming out of the draft, but I understand that it was he went I think a pick before the Vikings traded up. But I think Hall in itself was a good pick for them to take on day 3 and see what you can get out of him, and if you can develop him. And I think we haven't really gotten a chance to see how Kevin O'Connell and the team and the offensive staff develop a young quarterback behind Kirk Cousins. And I think they've wanting to been doing that the last couple of years, and I think Hall gives them that opportunity. And so I like that. And then rewind to Saturday. I liked what I saw. He definitely looked better than week 1. he looked a little less jittery, a little bit more like confident in what he was doing. And I think that's all you can ask for from a 5th-round rookie coming in, playing with a backup offensive lineman, backup receivers, and those things. And I think he played well, all things considered. I think Forno laid out a lot of great points of what he did and didn't do. I think you just want to continue to see how he progresses and moves. And I still really loved his feel for the pocket. Besides the one play that took a sack, like that's going to happen to any young quarterback. But I do really enjoy his ability to escape and feel pressure. And I think as he just grows and gets more reps, I think he's just going to get a better feel for that. But overall, I thought he played well. I think some of his receivers let him down a little bit. And obviously the offensive line in front of him just got destroyed by guys like Tahir Tart. So there wasn't a lot I think he could do in some of those situations, but I did like some of the progress we saw from preseason week 1 to preseason week 2. And I didn't see the practices, but sounds like he didn't get as many reps. So you'd like to see moving forward with him and Jordan Te'amu to kind of compete to get as many reps in that 3rd preseason game as possible. Because I'd assume the starting offense is ramping up, so he might not get as many opportunities during that inter squad scrimmage this week. So that game is going to be really important for him.
Do you guys want to see him start that final game then? I mean, Forno, you've seen him come in for Nick Mullins the last few games. You want to see him actually start for maybe like more than a half or more than 50% of the game coming up?
I wanted to see him start on Saturday because I really didn't think there was anything necessarily to gain with Nick Mullins. At this point, Mullins is who he is. He's a top 5 backup quarterback in the league. And I classify backup as a guy who it wasn't drafted to be the future quarterback. He is a backup. He is a Chase Daniel. Like, he's a top 5 traditional backup quarterback in the NFL. He doesn't need these reps. A guy like Hall needs the reps. And I thought they should have given him the first half to work with the better players to really see how you can continue to grow. And I think he'll end up having the start on Saturday, or maybe Mullins plays like 1 or 2 series. But in reality, he doesn't need to. Hall needs the reps. Cine needs the reps. That's why I think these guys should be playing more. But it also could be getting Mullins just more of a comfortability factor. It could just be something Kevin O'Connell wanted. Like, Malik Willis got all the reps on, except for 2, because they did a weird wildcat gimmick for 2 plays. But that was more of a Will Levis infamous tweak than anything. But I think you should try and get Hall as many reps as you can, so you can get a better picture of how he's growing and how he's progressing and what he could potentially be.
All right, so we've seen 2 preseason games so far from the Vikings, and even just looking ahead to the positions afterwards. So the Vikings, when they're on the clock, whether that's pick 23, hell, not if that's pick 32, because they actually won the GD Super Bowl this year for the first time before we died. Wherever it is, what position group do you think is starting to creep up here as we've gotten some preseason games and some training camp under our belt? Forno, what's the number 1 position group you would be looking to add to when the Vikings are on the clock next year in the 2024 NFL draft?
Oh, for the draft. Interesting. I'd probably be looking at edge rusher as my focus because it's completely uncertain. In theory, your top 3 edge rushers are all gone off the team next year unless you extend them. Danielle Hunter's contract expires. Marcus Davenport's expires. DJ Wanham's expires. Patrick Jones entering the final year of his deal. That's a lot of edge talent. And there is a good amount of edge talent here coming up. And the Vikings haven't taken one in the first round since 2006. And 2005 was Erasmus James' complete bust. 2006, Kenechi Udeza had the unfortunate happenstance of getting cancer. And that kind of derailed his career. And now he's coaching in college football, which is wonderful. But the amount of success they've had with these mid-round picks, I think really tainted the last regime because they kept getting Brian Robinson 4th round, Ray Edwards 4th round, Everson Griffin 4th round, Danielle Hunter 3rd round. They kept getting talented guys without spending a lot of draft capital. Now that you have a new regime and you have this high priority on these difference makers at premium positions, maybe that's the route you go. And with the uncertainty at the position, that's where I'm looking at first.
Edge is important because I think you can always have as many edge rushers as possible. Danielle Hunter is potentially going to be walking. Obviously, DeMarcus Davenport, we'll wait and see. You could franchise tag him. You could sign him to a long-term deal. There's definitely options there. But then after those 2, I mean, it is good luck trying to find pass rushers if both those guys end up walking. That's a big hole to fill. Miles, what position group is looking thin in your mind here as we have seen a couple preseason games and after some training camp practices? What position group do you think the Vikings should try to address in the draft next year?
Well, I mean, quarterback is the obvious one for me, but I won't go there because I think we've had those conversations so many times. But I think kind of to piggyback off what Forno's saying from the like defensive line, I think the interior defensive line is something I'd be looking at as well. I just think they have not addressed the trenches in any capacity over the last handful of years. And basically since like the Linval Joseph, Tom Johnson years, it's kind of been on a steady decline since. And I think, they have Harrison Phillips now, who's been solid. I think he's a solid player. Dean Lowry, who's probably like a below average starter. And then Kairos Tonga, who they picked up off the street last year after week 1 or 2. And so not to begrudge anything toward him. I think he played well last year, but they just don't have like an interior guy that can really wreck an offensive line. And they haven't had that in a long time. And I think that's a really important piece to a defense like Brian Flores is and previously Mike Zimmer's. And so I think that should be an area they address, whether it's getting a really big nose tackle to really come in and punish offensive lines, or focus on that defensive end who can give you a little bit more pass rush juice from the inside. So I think those are probably those spots for me that I think they haven't spent much draft capital on either. Like edge rusher, I think the last time they spent any significant draft capital on that position was honestly don't remember now that I'm thinking about it. I don't think they've spent
probably Jared Allen trading a first and 2/3.
Yeah, and he's a defensive end in a 4-3, right? And that's like a Daniil Hunter outside linebacker edge rusher position in this defense, right? And so to your point, they've spent it on Linval Joseph and they spent it on who am I thinking? Who's the big dude they got from the Ravens?
Michael Pierce.
Oh,
thank you, Michael Pierce.
Yep.
They spent money on those guys, but they've never really invested in the draft. And so I think it could be
Sharif Floyd in 2013 in round one.
That was the last guy that was the one I'm thinking of. Sharif Floyd's the last one in a decade where they've actually spent any sort of resource in the draft that isn't a 3rd, 4th, 5th round pick. And so I think they should look there.
Yeah, when you look back in the early 2000s, right? So they draft Kevin Williams, they sign Big Pat Williams, they trade for Jared Allen. They have Ray Edwards, who's a solid complementary piece. They drafted Brian Robinson, who has turned into a really solid complementary piece to all on that defensive line. So they use all three assets basically of roster management, right, to try to build up a really important position. And for a long time, the defensive line for the Vikings, you can make a case from Kevin Williams all the way through Brian Robinson and into Daniil Hunter. They had a very good defensive line, but the last 3 years it's been really leaky. And you're seeing that in the preseason games, even that, teams are just running all over the place against the Vikings, which has been a common theme basically since 2020. And that's definitely something they got to fill up. It's not a sexy thing to fill up your run defense and load up on nose tackles and defensive tackles, but you also just can't be a sieve letting everyone run through your defense. So I'm curious too. I think defensive edge and line in general is probably going to be 1A or 1B that they're going into next year. And if that's, of course, if they don't have their quarterback of the future. But I think just from a position group, they have to figure that part out because you just need as many guys as possible there. Let's get into this freaks list here. So Bruce Feldman of The Athletic, Tyler's combed through some great freaks lists. We've talked about this before on Purple Daily on Draft. We haven't really delivered too much college football prospects to a degree. We've talked about some quarterbacks, but Tyler has pulled a few names here on the freaks list. And if I say freaks list, I have to hit the football sounder. May as well. So Forno, fire away. Give us, let's start with a few names here on this freaks list that are really intriguing for you this college football season that could be available to the Vikings in the draft next year.
Well, the first guy I'm going to mention is number 1 on the list, and he's not going to be available in the draft until 2026 because he's an incoming true freshman. His name's Nicholas Harbor. He is a wide receiver, tight end, defensive end hybrid, and they're going to use him more as a versatile offensive weapon. This dude was described by one of his coaches of South Carolina, Jody Wright. He's, I would say, a taller Julio Jones with a Derrick Henry type build. And this dude is absolutely nuts. A 10-2 200-meter dash, 6'4" in the 60 hurdles, and a 20-63 in the 200. He's hitting almost 23 miles per hour at near 250 pounds. This dude is just an absolute monster. And I don't know how South Carolina's can necessarily utilize him in the passing game, especially with what Spencer Rattler is good at and how inconsistent he is, but the athleticism of this dude is absolutely bonkers. Number 2 is Marvin Harrison Jr. Some people are calling him the best wide receiver prospect ever. And it's, especially when you have the pedigree, it's really hard to kind of, like, when you watch him, it's hard to say no. Like, he is so technically sound at nearly 6'4", 210, but he's also athletically freaky. He benches 380. He did 20 reps of 225, which is like that combine measurement. Like, he squats 500. He broad jumps near 11 feet. It has a short shuttle under 4 seconds. Like, freaky stuff. And 2 other guys I'll mention before we kind of dive into some more stuff. Michigan defensive tackle Chris Jenkins. Now, Michigan has a tradition of just having the freakiest athletes on the defensive line. You look at Aiden Hutchinson. You look at Mozzie Smith last year with 330 pounds. So it had a faster 3-cone than Aiden Hutchinson. The next one is Chris Jenkins. His dad started in the Super Bowl for the Carolina Panthers against the New England Patriots back in 2003. He played in the NFL for a long time. He did 32 reps at 225, 760 pounds on the combo twist, and Mozzie was doing 800 pounds on that. But he also had an extra 30 pounds, which makes a little bit of a difference. Like, he's running a 7.163 cone, a 4.33 shuttle, broad jumping nearly 10 feet, and vertical 34 at 307 pounds. Just absolutely bonkers stuff from a defensive lineman. And you don't see that kind of stuff unless you go to Michigan. Last guy I want to mention is a personal favorite of mine, prospect-wise. If you haven't watched Western Kentucky football, I highly recommend you do so. You've heard me talk about Austin Reed. His receiver, Malachi Corley, it's not insane to think he could be the next Deebo Samuel type player in the NFL, because that's almost how he gets used. He had 101 catches for 1,295 yards last year. 975 of those were after the catch, and he had 40 missed tackles. He's like 5'11", 220, and his like biceps look like Hulk Hogan's. Just an absolutely nuts receiver. He hits 23 on the GPS, 4.4340 official time, 4.08 short shuttle, and he benches over 350. Like, he kind of looks like a muscle hamster, but he's got ability to attack down the field. Just with that Western Kentucky air raid, they do a lot of those screens, a lot of those short routes, option routes, to be able to really attack defenses and gain yards after the catch. He's a guy that could end up maybe climbing into round 1. I would probably think he's a solid day 2 pick, but the Vikings are going to need to invest in receiver again. Do they want to do it in the first 100 picks? I don't necessarily know that they have to, but Corley would be a fantastic player to pair with Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson with his skill set.
Let's dive more into Chris Jenkins here. So Jordan Reed of ESPN back in July did a 2024 mock, and he actually had Chris Jenkins going 22nd overall in his 2024 mock. That would be to the Los Angeles Chargers, of course. And the Vikings, who have typically picked between, it seems like always, about 23 and 17 for the most part, because they're usually a fringe wildcard team, or they're one of the last playoff teams out. Are you projecting, you think, Tyler, that Chris Jenkins is someone that could be even going higher here? Do you think he's going to be a first-round pick in next year's draft?
Jenkins is a little bit of a wild card because he doesn't have a lot of production yet. And a lot of these way too early mocks, you're looking at projection. You're looking at, hey, what do we think this guy is going to be this year? And then try to project off of that. I know everybody makes fun of Todd McShay, and it's well-deserved for putting Mitch Leidner in the first round of his way too early mock because Mitch Leidner was never good. And Chris Jenkins just hasn't had opportunity to really be able to be good consistently, but he's flashed. And the athleticism that we talked about is just absolutely bonkers. So if he puts everything together this year, and one of the things with that Michigan defensive line is they keep churning guys out consistently. David Ojabo, Aiden Hutchinson, Mozzie Smith, this last year, Mike Morris, like they're getting guys to the NFL and they're doing it at a pretty steady pace. And Jenkins, I think, is the next guy. Wouldn't shock me if he ends up sneaking into the top 10, but I will say this is a very heavy draft as far as quarterback and wide receiver and offensive tackle. So top 10 might be pushing it. I would project him comfortably in the first round right now. And if he performs well, he could be a player that ends up being a steal in like the teens just because of what other premium positions there are out there.
Miles, are you looking at anyone in college football that you're really excited to watch this year?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always a receiver guy. That's always been my flavor. But in terms of like the Vikings positions, obviously we kind of touched on some of those positions, but I think some of the freaks list. I was doing the same thing as looking into the freaks list a little bit because I always read it from Bruce Feldman every year. But guys like Jordan Birch, who just transferred from South Carolina over to Oregon, he's a like edge rusher, D lineman, D end. Kind of excited to see how he can make that transition to the Pac-12 in Oregon, that fast-paced offense, and how quickly they move, and obviously the swag. But then Chris Jenkins is always an obvious one, I think, for everybody, just based off of he was recently out, like social media came out with like the information about him and his dad, and so I think that's really cool. And then Texas Tech might have another guy, an edge rusher. His name's Miles Cole, his namesake. He spells his name the right way, the way I do Miles. So I had to call him out from Texas Tech, but he's an edge rusher. So I'm excited to see how he can do with Tyree Wilson, who recently was drafted by the Vegas Raiders, and see if he can kind of take over that defense and see if he can step up and become a guy for them. But he's an uber athletic guy. And then running back is like a sneaky one that I think with Alexander Madison, we know he's this is his first year as a full-time starter. He's on like a pretty cheap 2-year deal. And then the guys behind him are kind of unknowns. So it wouldn't surprise me if the way things shook out, if the Vikings were looking to add like a mid-round running back next year. And so, I mean, there are a couple guys that might be at back of end, first round, early second round picks, like Braylon Allen from Wisconsin. You got Trey Benson from Florida State, Raheem Sanders from Arkansas, and like William Shipley from Clemson. So there's a lot of those types of guys coming out who are either just like uber explosive or they're like the more compound, like bigger backs. And so I think, whatever flavor the Vikings are looking for, they should have a bevy of options at running back as well. So I'm not a proponent of spending high picks on running backs, but I like the old regime. But you give me third, fourth, fifth round, I got no issue with adding a guy within that round to this offense because I think it's something that they might be needing to address.
I like it. I mean, we got college football knocking on the door, right, Forno? When's the
Thank God, college football is back this Saturday.
Let's go.
Saturday.
Notre Dame taking
That's
on
right.
Navy in Dublin, Ireland.
Wait, they're doing that early this year?
Yeah, it was the first game of the year last year
that was
too.
last year too.
Week 0.
Yeah. You're right.
I'm thrilled to have college football back. It'll be nice to have it on one of my 3 TVs downstairs while I watch the Vikings game. And September 2nd, week 1 is here, and I cannot wait. I'm excited to see what as Miles mentions, Braylon Allen, who I'm going to be honest, I'm not a fan of. I don't think he's going to translate to the NFL at all. But he's going into the Phil Longo offense, which instead of running power I every 5 minutes with duo and counter and gap, wham blocks all over the place, it's going to be 3, 4, 5 wide running a playbook that is 26 plays deep. That's it. 26 plays. They don't run a lot of the traditional stuff at Wisconsin. That's going to be fascinating.
And he didn't transfer, which was surprising to me too.
I heard he had big money offers from schools like USC, and I'm shocked he didn't go. Yeah. I also heard Michigan, which was an intriguing one, considering they also expected Corum to leave, and he came back. Yeah. So what is Minnesota going to do with Ethan Kaliakmanis? Is he going to be ready? He kind of wasn't last year, but he showed progress. And then my Florida Gators are stuck with Graham Mertz as a starting quarterback. And let me tell you, I've never been less excited to watch a Florida Gator offense than I am this year. It's going to be brutal, but college football is back, and there's nothing like sitting on your couch on a Saturday and watching college football from 11 a.m. to 1:30 in the morning, and I can't wait.
I'm excited. Let's get into some football here. We're going to get some more college football talk as well on Purple Daily on Draft. Drop us a note in the comments if you want some scouting reports or how we see Vikings fitting with one of these prospects and whatnot. Purple Daily on Draft every Monday right here on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button too for daily Vikings entertainment. This has been Purple Daily on Draft. We'll see you next Monday.